So good morning to you all. We're going to start today a little bit different than we've been starting. Up till now, I've always kind of done the slide lectures first, and then we moved into doing some demo work. And for the next 2 lectures at least, there will be a couple more slide lectures throughout the semester. But a lot of where we're going now is more in the demonstration role. So I'm going to show you guys how to do certain things, and then you guys will learn those skills. It's just kind of the way it works out. Today we're going to start in AutoCAD. So you've made your way through the Adobe suite, Photoshop, InDesign, and then Illustrator. Now we're going to go into AutoCAD. AutoCAD is a very complicated program. How many people know AutoCAD already? All right, so for those of you that know AutoCAD already, you get to snooze through the first 2. That's good. And you know what that means? That means you can work on your portfolios. So it doesn't mean you can just space out and do whatever you do on the computer. You can do your portfolios, which is fine. It gives you plenty of time to work on that, which is quite good. I do think, however, that I may know a few things about AutoCAD that you don't know. And I guess it's possible that maybe you know more of AutoCAD than I do, but I kind of doubt it. I've been doing AutoCAD for a very, very long time. AutoCAD is kind of the gold standard of design. It's the original design software. Well, it's not really the original, but it became the kind of the design software for a long time. And as a result of that, it's just kind of stuck around. And there are other programs that have come and gone along the way, but AutoCAD's kind of always just been there. It's made by a different company. The company is not Adobe anymore. It's called Autodesk. That's the company that makes it. And they also make some of the other major design software that's used today, including Revit, which is the architectural design software that's very, very popular today, and Fusion 360, which is the industrial design software that's very popular today. So learning AutoCAD is kind of like learning Photoshop and then being able to translate some of those skills into InDesign or Illustrator. It's kind of the same thing. It's written by the same company, so as a result, there's some crossover and some similarity. You can do almost anything you need to do from a design standpoint in AutoCAD, except for 3D. AutoCAD does technically have some 3D capability. I wouldn't recommend it, nor would I spend my time learning it. I know that they have some 3D AutoCAD classes, or they used to have 3D AutoCAD classes here. Unless it's absolutely required, I wouldn't do it. That's just my opinion. You get a lot more out of working in something like Fusion 360, or even better, in my opinion, working in Rhino. But that's no surprise. I'm slightly biased because I teach the Rhino class. So maybe this will entice you into taking Rhino with me next semester. Anyway, my purpose in AutoCAD is not to somehow make you learn AutoCAD in 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks. It's not possible. The truth is, to really know AutoCAD and to be fast and proficient in AutoCAD takes a lot of practice and a lot of time. The people that have worked in AutoCAD for a long time can work really fast. And that's a good thing, because when you're designing, you want the software to go away and you want to focus on the design part of it. I hope to teach you some of the lesser known or lesser taught skills in AutoCAD, such that you'll be able to create good scaled printed drawings. And my hope is that you'll understand viewports in paper space versus model space and some of the things that somehow they kind of forget to teach you in the AutoCAD classes. And so I've framed what I'm trying to accomplish with this short module on AutoCAD in that context. So these are the things that I think you really need to know. For those of you that have never touched AutoCAD, it will be a bit of a challenge. The good news is what we're drawing will be relatively simple. So if you get stuck and you're a little bit confused, it's no problem. I'll help you through it. There's no reason that everybody can't get to the final product here. So AutoCAD, we now have a software license agreement with AutoCAD where they update every year. So we're now on AutoCAD 2019. And that changes yearly. AutoCAD also updated their file format in 2018. So if you're working in AutoCAD 2018 or 2019, it's a different format than any previous version of AutoCAD. And so you have to be careful. I found out on Monday that the AutoCAD in the laser cutter room has not been updated. So if you're working on AutoCAD and you go over to do some laser cutting, you have to make sure you save back into the 2013 version, which was the version before the 2018 when the major shift happened. It didn't mean that there weren't more versions. They had a version for 2014, 15, 16, 17, but they kept the same file type for that chunk of time. So 2018, the file type changed just a bit. So just be aware of that. I'm going to go ahead and open up the standard AutoCAD. There are 2 different AutoCADs available to us. Actually, it looks like there's a few other links to it. There is the AutoCAD 2019 English. That's the one I'm going to open. There is an AutoCAD that is meant for architecture people. It's got some different symbol libraries in it. It allows you to work with doors a little bit differently. It's not that different. They're almost interchangeable. So if you happen to open the architectural version, it's not a big deal. But we're working in the standard version today. So I'm going to double click on AutoCAD 2019 in English, and we'll open that one up. And so once it's open, I get to my kind of default screen here. I'm going to create a brand new file. If I go in the upper left corner next to the A, there's a blank page looking thing. That is the new file button. If I click on new file, I will create a new file. It's going to ask me to select a template. The default is the ACAD template. That's fine. We can just use that template. There are other templates depending on what you're doing. I wouldn't worry about them. Just stick with the basic one. And we'll go ahead and say open. And now that our new drawing is open, I want to take a little bit of time and talk through what's happening in AutoCAD, because it looks very different than the Adobe products. So I kind of want to walk through it so you have a better understanding of it. So at the very, very top next to the A are some of the standard things that we need to do, like new files or saving your files is the disk icon, plotting or printing. AutoCAD calls printing plotting. It's essentially the same thing. It just means it's bigger. And so those are kind of some of the standard things that you may be going to need that are kind of the typical all-program tools. Below that, we have a series of ribbons. The default is the home ribbon, which is shown right now. But there are other ribbons: insert, annotate, parametric, view, etc., going down this list. We're going to stick with just the home ribbon. Most of everything we'll do in this class will be only in the home ribbon, so we don't need to get too fancy with the other ribbons. The home ribbon, when it's selected, gives us certain categories. The first category here on the left is the draw category. The biggest buttons are the things that are most often used. The smaller buttons going down the side are less often used. If you want something that's not shown here, you can click this little drawer and it will give you things that are even less likely to be used. That's how they organize it. We can move from the draw section. Next one over is modify. These are things like moving, copying, rotating, mirroring, etc. We move over into the next category, and that's annotation. We're going to stay away from the annotation for right now. That's kind of its own topic. I actually won't even talk about dimensions in this class because it's kind of its own realm. You need probably at least a week or two to grasp the whole dimensions thing. Next one over is called layers. We will work extensively with layers, though not today. Today we're going to work on the default layer 0, and that's just fine. But I will talk through the layers quite a bit. Coming over here to the next one is blocks. We will talk about blocks in this class, so we'll visit that section a little bit. Next over is the properties. These are the properties about any particular thing that we're drawing. So if I drew something, I can see the properties relating to that particular item or object here in the properties menu. And then these at the end, the groups, the utilities, the clipboard, and the view, those are far less likely to be used. Sometimes you need to measure something, so it's there. But those are just kind of floating over there, should you need them down the road. AutoCAD does work with a tab system, so you can have multiple drawings open at once in AutoCAD. We have drawing 1 open here. That's our primary tab. That's what we're working in. The drawing space itself is black. We're going to draw our lines in white. This was done in AutoCAD a long time ago because people used to stare, well, they still do, stare at AutoCAD for hours and hours and hours and hours. So you can be in AutoCAD drawing for days on end. And when you do that, staring at white lines on a black background is much easier on your eyes than the opposite. If you have a white background with black lines, it's much harder for your eyes to work on. Your eyes get fatigued. So AutoCAD flipped it around, and so it's the only thing that's a little tricky about it is when you go to print, things that are white become black. It just flip-flops black and white. That's it. And we'll talk about that as we go forward. It is based on a coordinate system. In the lower left corner here, we have an x-axis and a y-axis, the x being red, the y being green. We'll talk more about that as I start to demo today. On the right side here, we have our standard views. Right now, we're looking down at the top view. It shows top. We can change that, and I will go through changing that a little bit later on. But we'll stick with just the top view, with north being up for now. Right across the bottom here is called our command line. And AutoCAD used to have a much bigger command line to see. They've shrunk it down, and it kind of floats around a little bit. But this is something that you want to always kind of keep an eye on, because as you keep an eye on that, you will learn that it prompts you with certain things. So you're either looking at your cursor or you're looking at that command line down at the bottom, and it may ask you some questions depending on what it is that we're doing. I'll emphasize that as we go forward. Below that, we're currently working in model space. We have a couple layout paper space tabs. We're not going to worry about those until later on in the course. If we come over to the right side here, these are a bunch of tools that are available to us. Let me turn something off here. This is what yours looks like. Since we made it to the toolbars, or the tools down here at the bottom, I want you to click on the very last one, which is the 3 lines there, called Customization. And from this list, I want you to check where it says Dynamic Input. It's turned off by default, but for this first little bit of illustration that I'm going to do with you, I'd rather have that turned on. So we'll check it, and that tool then shows up down at the bottom. And so let's talk through what some of these are. The first one here is the drawing grid. Do we want the drawing grid on or the drawing grid off? It doesn't really matter. Some people get really worked up about the grid, and they want to have the grid set at a certain interval so they can snap to the grid and work within the grid. In all honesty, I completely ignore that the grid is even there. I just draw. So it's a matter of preference. But it is currently turned on. As we come over here, there is something right here called Dynamic Input. It's a plus sign with a little bar next to it. It may be on, it may be off for you guys. I want to make sure that it is off. So we're going to click on it and make sure that it is not highlighted in that light blue color. Next one over is called Ortho. And what Ortho does is it restricts lines to be at 90 degrees. So I can only draw in the X direction and the Y direction. That's it. I can't draw a diagonal. And so sometimes when you're drawing, that can be really beneficial, because you want to lock in and make sure you're always drawing it straight. Right now it's turned off, and that's fine. We can leave it off. Next one over, that's restricting to specified angles. Don't worry about that for right now. We'll move over here. Trying to think if there's anything else. So this option here, the snap cursor to certain reference points, these are called object snaps. And it lets you grab onto certain pieces of an object. If you have a line and you want to grab onto the end of that line, this is something that needs to be turned on, which it currently is, and it's set for endpoint. We'll come back and I'll show you this one a little bit more as we go through today. The rest of these options are fine for right now. We're going to ignore them and start our drawing. So I've made it through kind of the initial setup of how AutoCAD works, and now we're going to actually start setting up our drawing itself. So the first thing that I need you to do is I need you to set up the units, the drawing units that we're going to be drawing in. And I think one of the important things about AutoCAD, or several of these major design software, is that we actually draw things in full scale. So if I were designing a building and that building was 20 feet long, I would draw it 20 feet long. So everything is at full scale. We deal with scaling down when we go to print. When we do layouts, when we do viewports, that's when we do scaling. When we're in model space here, everything that we draw is full size. So it's easy. There's no math in your head. You just draw. So in order to specify our correct units, I'm going to go ahead and just type in right now units. And you see that it goes into that little command line down here at the bottom. And when I type in units and press enter on the keyboard, it brings up the Drawing Units dialog box. And with the Drawing Units dialog box, I want to change the length type from decimal to architectural. That's going to put it into feet and inches. Below that, I can set a precision. How precise do I want this drawing to be? In our case, 1/16 of an inch is plenty precise. We're not going to get finer than that. If you were designing a really small object, and really tiny increments mattered, you could set that to up to 16 decimal places of accuracy. So it can be extremely accurate should you want it to be that accurate. For our purposes, 1/16 of an inch is just fine, and our angle is currently set in decimal degrees. That's fine as well. I'll go ahead and say OK. And now my units have been set. There's one other thing that I forgot to put on the handout today that should have gone right next. So I apologize it's not written out here. It's not on the website either, but I'm going to tell you how to do it right now. And that is that we're going to set the drawing limits. Actually, we're going to change the drawing limits from its default template. And this is going to give us a little bit more space to draw. It doesn't mean that we couldn't draw a bigger object. It's just going to help our view a little bit. So go ahead and type in limits. And when you type in limits and press enter, we're going to look down at the command line and see what it says. So I've pressed limits and I've typed in limits. I've pressed enter. And now it says specify lower left corner. And it's currently set at 0, 0. Because that's the default. So I like it being set at 0, 0, so I'll just hit enter. Then it asks me to specify the upper right corner. So currently it's set up for 1 foot and 9 inches. Well, we're going to be drawing a building today, so I need a lot more space. So I'm going to go ahead and type in 30 and then the apostrophe sign. The apostrophe sign represents feet. So 30 apostrophe. And then the comma sign, and then another 30, and then an apostrophe. So 30 feet by 30 feet. And I'll go ahead and press enter. And that gives me a little bit more space to work with. Last thing I'll do before I start drawing is I'll press the Z key for zoom. I could also just type in zoom. It's just quicker to just press Z. And then I'll press enter. And I'm going to choose extents. And I can do that by clicking on extents or typing the blue letter. So you see, well, you might not be able to see that on the projector. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. The blue E represents extents. So I could just type E followed by enter. And it should zoom out for me. We'll see. OK, so now it's time to start actually drawing. So like I said, AutoCAD is based on a coordinate system. It's mathematically driven. It is a vector-based program, not a raster-based program. So it's built on math. And because of that, we can use the coordinate system to our advantage. We can use this graph to our advantage. And you guys may remember way back in like algebra and stuff where you had to graph an equation and you had to figure out where points were on a graph. Same thing applies here. Our origin, our starting point, is right where x and y meet, right there. That is point 0, 0 in space. Anything going in the x direction is the first half of the coordinate. So I could go over 2, for example, 1, 2. That would be 2, 0, because it's not going up in the y direction. So if I wanted to go to this point, it would be 2, 1 to get to that point. So we can use this to our advantage. I'm going to come up and choose the Polyline tool right there. It's the second tool over, Polyline. And it asks me specify start point. So instead of just trying to get my cursor right over the start point like that, the problem with that is as I zoom in, I realize that, you know what, I'm not really on the start point anymore. I'm off. So instead, I'm going to choose the Polyline tool, and I'm going to specify my start point. I'm going to say I want to start at 0, 0, and I'll press enter. That means it starts right at, no matter how much I zoom in, it's always going to start right at that 0, 0 point. So there it is. Now the next thing is I want a line that is 24 feet along the y direction here. And so if I want a line that's 24 feet along this direction, I would not be going anything in the x direction. So my first coordinate would be 0. I would put a comma in, and the next coordinate would be 24 feet, because I want to go 24 feet in the y direction. So I'd type 24 followed by the apostrophe symbol and press enter. I'm going to use my scroll wheel to zoom out there a little bit. And we can now see that I have a line going from 0, 0 up to 24 feet. Now that I have that, I want to draw a line that is 12 feet over from this point, over 12 feet. So in that world, it would be 12 feet over and up 24 feet. So I would type in 12 feet, comma, 24 feet. And I'll press enter. These two coordinates are called absolute coordinates. So they are relative to point 0, 0 in space. So I have to know where 0, 0 is, and then I can specify a particular point. Sometimes when you're drawing, you don't know where 0, 0 is, nor do you want to do the math to figure out, relative to point 0, 0, where do I want my point to be. So we can use something different that are called relative coordinates. So relative coordinates are relative to the last point you clicked, rather than to point 0, 0. So the last point that I clicked was right here. And so relative to that point, if I wanted a line to go down 6 feet, I could use a relative coordinate. And I do that, I tell AutoCAD that it's relative by putting in the @ symbol, like the email @ symbol. I put in the @ symbol, and so I say relative to the last point, I want to go 0 in the x, and I want to go -6 feet in the y direction. So I type in the @ sign, 0, comma, -6 apostrophe for feet. And I'll go ahead and hit enter. And that then creates a line that is -6 feet from the last point I clicked. I can continue with these relative coordinates again. So relative to this point, which is the new last point that I clicked, I want to go over 12 feet. So this time it would be the @ symbol. It would be 12 feet in the x direction, comma, 0, because nothing in the y direction. And I would press enter. And that gives me 12 feet in that direction. Now I want to come straight down. I could use that relative coordinate again. It would be at 0, comma, negative, helps if I put the negative in, -12 feet, and then enter. And just for illustration purposes, I could flip back to the absolute coordinates. In this case, it would be over 12 from 0, 0 and up 6. So it would be 12 feet, sorry, comma, 6 feet. And then this one would be 12 feet. Recognize there's no @ symbol now, comma, 0 feet, enter. And then when I'm done, I can snap back to this point because my snaps are on, or I could type C to close the shape. Either way, we'll get to the same result. And that then creates this shape, which is the outline of the building that we wanted to create. So I do this, and I turn off dynamic input to illustrate that AutoCAD is based on a coordinate system, and that you can use the coordinate system to your advantage. Most of the time, you're not going to worry about absolute coordinates. You're going to be worried about relative coordinates, the @ sign coordinates. And sometimes it's relevant if you know, for example, you're creating a line and you want it to go over 12 and up 6. You could just type in at 12 feet, comma, 6 feet, and you can get that slope, for example. So there are times where this coordinate system is really beneficial when you're drawing. And that's why I like to introduce it. The truth is, though, most of you will leave dynamic input turned on. So I'll go ahead and click the plus sign with the box next to it to turn dynamic input back on. And this changes a little bit in how we draw. So if I were drawing this shape again, I'm just going to draw it over here for illustration purposes. At this point, you see that instead of having, let me turn dynamic input off and do that one more time. Oops. Hold on. Sorry, I lost my tools here. When I'm drawing, see how I have nothing, no input text boxes next to my cursors as I'm drawing? If I turn dynamic input on and I start my polyline, I get kind of a measurement on one side that's selected as text. Do you guys see that? So this is allowing me to specify a particular distance. So one, as I move my cursor, I can see the distance change. But I could also, because it's highlighted text, just type in 24 feet and press enter. And it draws a line that's 24 feet. So this makes life a lot easier to draw. Furthermore, if I wanted to go over by 12 feet, I could do that. I want to go down by 6 feet, I can do that. So all I'm doing is typing in the length of these lines. I could also type in the angle. If I wanted the angle, say, to be 45, I could type that in, and my angle would be set at 45, and then I could specify a length. But that's kind of a more advanced thing. I just wanted to point that out. So I could go with 12 feet here. I could go down 12 feet. I could go over 12 feet. I could go down 6 feet. And I could close my shape right there and end up with my overall building. So same way of getting, I got the same end result. I just did it slightly differently as I went through. So now that I have the perimeter of my building here, it's time to create another wall to the inside. So we're not going to get into the technicalities of how a wall is made and how thick a wall really is. We're going to use round numbers. I'm going to say the wall is 6 inches thick. So I will use the offset command to create the second interior wall. It's available right here. It looks like two C's nested inside each other. I'll click on that, or I could type offset into the command line. And it's going to ask me to specify the offset distance. And this is where, technically down here at the command line, it says offset, specify offset distance. But also at my cursor, it says specify offset distance. So I'm seeing it in both places. That's what that dynamic input does. So all I need to do is specify the distance. In this case, it would be 6 inches. And I'll press enter. Then it says select object to offset. So all I need to do is select this shape. And then I need to say whether it's going toward the inside or toward the outside. So for my drawing, it's going toward the inside. So I move my cursor to the inside. And I just click. And I end up with a double set of lines that represent the exterior walls. I'll go ahead and press enter to finish. And now I have that second set. So I'll do it one more time. I'll go back to the offset tool here. Specify offset distance. I'll type in 6 inches. Specify object to offset. There's my line. Specify point on side to offset. I want it to be on the inside here. And I'll press enter to finish. And I end up with my double set of lines that represent the exterior walls. So at this point, I'm going to keep going, and I'll show you a little bit more here. But ultimately, what you're creating is the floor plan that's on the back. It's very simple. It's designed to be simple. If you've never worked in AutoCAD, it will be good just to get this done. If you've worked in AutoCAD and want to mess around with it, or you want to change the building a little bit, that's totally fine with me. This is just getting everybody started. Remember, if you're breezing through it, just spend your time working on your portfolio, which is not a bad thing. Okay? So I'm going to continue, and I want to cut the door that is in the top of this building open. And I'll do that by using my line tool. And I want to draw a line that's right in the middle. So I happen to know where the middle is, so I could specify where it is. But I could also use my snaps to do this. And currently, my object snap is not set to midpoint. It's not set to snap to the middle of a line. So I'm going to come down to my object snaps. Right here, it's the square with a little tiny square in the corner. I'll click the triangle next to it, and I'm going to turn on midpoint snap. The other one that I usually leave on that's not on by default is perpendicular snap. It's just a personal preference. So I'll tell you that I turn it on because I tend to turn it on when I'm working. So I have my endpoint, I have my midpoint selected, and I also have my perpendicular selected as well. So now that those are selected, I'm going to come back here, and as I come to the center of this line, I get a triangle. That's representing the midpoint. So if I click, it will be right in the middle of that side. And I can come down to the bottom, and I can click again right at the middle. And I'll press enter to finish my line. Now that I have that one line that's right in the middle, I can offset it to create either side of the door. I know the door is a 3-foot door, so when I do my offset, it's going to be half of 3 feet, so 1 foot 6 inches or 18 inches. Either way, I can put either value in. So I'll go back to my offset tool right there. Now it's going to ask for the distance. So remember, I could type in 1 foot 6 inches. The quotation mark represents inches. Or I could type in 18 inches. Either one is going to get me the same result. And press enter. Select object to offset. It would be this center object here. And I'm going to offset by 1 foot 6 in this direction. I'll come back and offset this by 1 foot 6 in that direction. So once I have these two lines, it's now time to get rid of this line and this line. So I'll press enter to finish the offset command. And then I want to get rid of this part of the line and this part of the line. I'm going to do that using the trim tool. So it's listed right here with the scissors. I can click on that or type trim into the keyboard. It says select objects or select all. It doesn't matter which way you do it. I could just select these 4 objects like that. Or I could select all by just pressing enter. Now it's going to ask me to trim my object. This is what do you want to get rid of? I want to get rid of that. And I want to get rid of that. It's not going to let me trim this middle object because it's not actually trimming the object. The whole object is there. I can't trim it anyway. I'll need to delete it. So I've trimmed off those 2 lines that I don't want. I'll press enter to finish the trim command. And then I can select this object here and just press the delete key on the keyboard to make that center go away. So I've now cut a hole through this particular door. Next thing I need to do would be to add the window to the side of the door. I know that it is 18 inches over before it starts. So as I create this, I don't want to start here and type in 18 inches and then go down like that. And the reason I don't want to do that is because I end up with a double line, 2 lines on top of each other, because I have this line segment. It's not clean for drawing. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that. And instead, I'll come back to my polyline, and I'm going to hover kind of over this point a little bit, and then I'll move my cursor over. So I get a little green plus sign right at that point, and as I move my cursor over, I can actually type in 18 inches, and it's going to go over 18 inches from that little green plus sign. And I can create that line. So let me do that one again. I'll start with my Polyline tool. I'll try to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. I'll move my cursor right over that corner. I just let it sit there. I don't click. I don't do anything. I just let it hover. Then I move my mouse to the right. And I get a little plus sign, and I get a green dotted line. It's hard to see it on the projector. I apologize for that. I get a little plus sign and that green dotted line running out. I can then specify a distance. So in this case, it was 1 foot 6. So 1'6 inches, 6 quotation. I'll press enter. And it's going to go over 1 foot 6 from that point. So I can create this line. And the advantage here is that this line doesn't have another piece of line that's over the top that's distracting or ultimately creating double lines on my walls. So I'll do it again for the other half of this window, though I could technically just do an offset to create the other half of this window. There's always multiple ways of doing it. I'll go back to my Polyline tool. I'll go to that endpoint. I'll hover there for a second. I'll move to my right. I get the plus sign and the green dotted line. And I'll go ahead and type in 2 feet, which is the width of that window. And I'll come down here. Now I've chosen to snap to perpendicular. So when I get to the bottom, I get the little perpendicular symbol, and it snaps to that perpendicular. To designate that this is a window, and the drawing is actually supposed to have this on it, but it's, the copy center didn't exactly show it correctly. It's supposed to have a little line running through the window, or a double pair of lines to represent the glass. So I can go back. and I could draw a line across. I could also offset this line to create a double line, like that, for example. If I was being really technical, after I did the offset, I should move this back up by 1/4 of an inch, just so that it's in the dead center. Doesn't really matter. That move, by the way, is accomplished by selecting my lines, going to the Move tool, selecting a base point, and specifying the distance that I wanted to move it. I want to point out right now that there are two different ways of selecting objects in AutoCAD. If I select from the right side to the left side, my selection rectangle is green. And when I do this selection, it's going to select everything that is touched by the rectangle. So in that case, it's selecting this bottom line and also this line over here. If I select from the left to the right, going this way, it's only going to select things that are completely contained within that selection rectangle. So if I did the same selection rectangle this way, I'd get only the window itself, not the other lines, because they're not completely contained within the selection. So getting used to selecting from right to left versus selecting from left to right, and the difference between those two selections can be very important long term. So one more time, I'll select from left to right, select just those two. And then I'm going to use the Move tool. I'll specify a base point, doesn't matter where it is. And I want to go straight up by 1/4 of an inch. I could type 1/4 inches. I could type 0.25 inches. Either way, I get the same result. And I'm back to having that window on this side. If I want to create the exact same window here on this side, I can select this, and I certainly could copy it and move it. I could also use the mirror command. So the mirror command is right here. And when I click mirror, it says specify first point of mirror line. This is the line across which you're reflecting your objects. So this is a little bit problematic because I don't have the center anymore here to do the mirror. I don't have the center of this wall, but I do have the center down here. So I can use my midpoint snap down at the bottom and do it straight, and I'll end up with my second object over here. AutoCAD always asks if you want to erase the original objects. Generally, no is the answer, because I want to keep the original objects and the mirrored objects. So I end up with those two. I can use the mirror command again. I could select these. I could go back to mirror. And this time I could mirror along this side to get this window down here at the bottom. I need a second window, this one here. I need another one that's 6 inches away from this window. Here's a copy command. So I'll select my window. I'll go to copy, right here. Specify a base point. Well, I know when I copy this, it needs to be 6 inches away from this side. So if I use my tracking here to create my base point that is 6 inches away, if I just typed in 6 inches, for example, when I go to paste it and I snap to that point, I know that it'll be 6 inches away. The other option would be to copy it. And then to move this, I can move it so that they're the same, and then move again. I'd have to select it or type P for previous, and then move it over by 6 inches. It's just a lot more steps to get there. So if you use your tracking when you do the copy, like this, selected, copy, over by 6, and right there to create the second window. It's a little bit more of an advanced technique, but a lot of you have already done some AutoCAD, so I might as well show that to you as well. So the last window that I need to create for now, there'll be more windows that I'll let you guys work on. The last window that I needed to create was on this wall. And of course, I could just draw the window, but I already have a window here. So I could copy it and rotate it, but I could also use the mirror command. And the difference here is that I'm going to mirror across a 45-degree line rather than a vertical or a horizontal line. So I'll select this window. I'll go up to mirror. And instead of picking a straight line, I'm going to mirror across from this corner to this corner and create the second window. So again, that's a more advanced technique, but it can save you a bunch of time knowing that you can mirror across that 45-degree line to turn the corner and create that window. But again, you could draw it yourself. Let's see what else. Doors. In this time, I'm going to draw a rectangle, so I'm not using my Polyline tool. I'll come all the way over to my rectangle tool. I'll start right at that corner. Here's a perfect opportunity to use our relative coordinates. I would say at the thickness of the door is 1.75 inches, 1 3/4 inches. And then comma, the length of the door is 3 feet. So I'll type in 3 feet, and I'll press enter. And in that case, it gave me the door, but it gave it to me in the wrong direction. That was a mistake on my end. So let me do it one more time. I should have done negative 36 inches. So this is, again, at 1.75 inches, comma, this time it should have been negative 3 feet, because it needs to go down. And there it is, there. The door swing arc, if you're going to do that, this arc isn't the best one for this purpose. Click on the triangle below arc and choose right here, start, end, and direction. That'll create the easiest arc. So it's under the arc tool, start, end, and direction. And you go start, end, and direction. And if you snap out to being horizontal, you get a nice little arc there for the door swing. So at this point, I'm going to let you guys start to work on this. Like I said, a lot of you already are very comfortable in AutoCAD, and that's fine. You can breeze through it, spend the rest of the time today working on your portfolio and getting caught up on that. You now have another assignment that needs to go in there. Actually, you have 2 more assignments. You have your lecture series poster, and you have your Charlie Harper. Both of those need to go in there. You also might have work from outside of this particular class that might need to go in there as well. So I think that just about covers everything that I needed to cover. I'm just double checking. A couple other things that may be useful for you. If I had 2 lines like this, and I wanted this line to get longer and come over and meet that line, I can use a command called extend. It would be under the modify tools down here somewhere. I always just type it in. It's that one right there. I thought it was extend. Well, let's just type in extend. Extend. Select objects. I'll select my 2 objects, press enter. And then I want this object to extend to meet that one. So I click on that object, and it extends to meet that other object. That's an extend. We already did trim to get rid of an extra piece of an object. Sometimes you want to connect 2 lines. And you want them to have a bevel at the corner. If that's the case, you would use a chamfer command. And you can type in chamfer. I need to specify my distance of the chamfers. So I'm going to click on distance here and say I want the first distance to be, let's say 1 foot. Oops. One more time here, 1 foot. Second distance, 1 foot. And then first line, second line, and it's going to make that angle for me. It's an option, should you want to do that. The other thing that I could do is I could have 2 of those lines. Again, same 2 lines. And I could do what's called a fillet, which is a radius corner instead of an angled corner. So if I type fillet, I need to specify my radius. So I could say this is a 1 foot again. And this time it would connect this line here and that line there with an arc, which may be something that's useful to you as well. I also find there's one little cheater trick that I tend to use very frequently, and that is when I have two lines in space, say like this, and I really want these two lines to come together at a corner. I can use the Filat command, and in my radius, instead of having an arc, I could take my radius to 0, which means it's going to be a corner, and I could say basically take this line and make them meet in space. And it's a trick that I use sometimes when I need to connect two lines together and have them come together at a 90-degree angle. So I'm just kind of throwing that out there for you, should you need to do that. So we've done mirror, we've done chamfer, we've done rotate. Oh, did I do rotate? I don't think I've done rotate. So rotating in AutoCAD, if I have a line and I want this line to rotate, I would select the line, go up to the rotate command, and it says specify base point. So this is the point around which you want to rotate. So I want to rotate around this point. And then it says specify rotation angle. So I could type in the value. Say I wanted 30 degrees. I could type in 30 degrees. Sometimes you want to rotate based on, like, let's say this object was already rotated, and I want to rotate this object further. I can go back to my rotate command. And if I did a regular rotate, it would rotate like this. If I go back to the rotate command, base point, and then I choose R for reference, I can say that this angle here is my reference, and then I'm moving from that point rather than from a horizontal line. It can be an easier way of rotating. It's more of an advanced topic, but I at least wanted to point that out, that there's an extra little R in there for rotate, or for reference. OK, so I'll let you guys go. When you're done with your drawing, we're going to use the Publish to Web Jpeg option to print your drawing. So I'm going to zoom in on my object here, and I'm going to go up to the plot icon, the printer icon at the very top of the page. And when I do that, I'm going to go under the printer and plotter name. I'm going to come down to my Publish to Web JPEG right there. The default paper size is just fine. And I want to make sure that my drawing shows up. So instead of plotting the display under plot area, I'm going to choose window. And that will let me specify a window around my object. I'm not going to worry about scale at all. It's set to fit to paper. That's fine. And when I say OK, it's going to ask me where I want to save this. So I could put it on the desktop for right now and save. And I could go verify. There it is. And there's that drawing. That's what you're going to be posting as your JPEG today at the end of class. Obviously, it'll be more embellished than the one that I just drew. Don't worry about line weights yet. We'll talk about that a little bit later on in the semester. And with that, you guys can begin AutoCAD.